The Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 2, verses 15 to 21. When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go now to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, which the Lord has made known to us." So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in the manger. When they saw this, they made known what had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. But Mary treasured all these words and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all that they had heard and seen, as it had been told to them. After 8 days had passed, it was time to circumcise the child, and he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. This is the Gospel of the Lord. Most of us, from time to time, enjoy the game of dividing humanity into two. There are 2 types of people, we say, night owls and early birds, or there are cat lovers and dog lovers. If you are English, the world is divided into those who, when they pour a cup of tea, put the milk in first, and those who put it in afterwards, humanity's post-lactarians and pre-lactarians. More contemporary and serious versions of this game divide humanity into Remainers and Leavers, or into Biden supporters or Trump supporters, into the sheep and the goats. It wouldn't be too difficult to come up with Christmas versions of the same game. There are 2 types of family, at least in Italy, those who celebrate on Christmas Eve and those who celebrate on Christmas Day. Or how about people who prefer Christmas and those who prefer New Year? Or those who prefer panettone and those who prefer pandoro? All of this brings me to the question that I want to ask you this morning. If I were to say to you that there are 2 kinds of Christian among us at Christmas time, those who prefer the shepherds and those who prefer the wise men, which are you? Most of us, I would suggest, approach the infant Christ either with the Magi or with the shepherds. To come with the Magi implies an intellectual journey towards faith. To come with the shepherds implies a shorter, more spontaneous, heart-driven pathway. The Church contains and needs both. It needs its scholars and its princes. It needs people who are able to enter the palaces and the universities on equal footing with the world's experts and rulers. Just as much, however, it needs everyday people who respond instinctively from the heart to the kingdom's message of peace and love and goodwill to all men. Having said that, however, I can't help thinking that the Church gives the shepherds a rather rough deal. The wise men, the kings of the Orient, the Magi, or whatever you want to call them, are given one of the Church's great feasts. They are celebrated at the Epiphany on January the 6th. The poor shepherds have no feast of their own. The Church has found names for the wise men: Caspar and Melchior and Balthazar. These names, incidentally, date from about the 5th century. But she hasn't found any names for the shepherds. But look, it is the night of Christmas. The shepherds are already here. Where are the wise men? Oh, there they are, still far, far off, late arrivals at the party. And another thing, I'm sure Mary and Joseph were much more at ease with the shepherds. I can just hear Joseph relishing a joke with one of them, and I can see the shepherds leaving with friendly embraces. When the great Eastern potentates came, it must have been all bows and curtsies, and Mary dying of embarrassment because she didn't have any chairs to offer them, let alone a decent tablecloth. Worse than all of that, though, worse than this downgrading of the shepherds in comparison with the wise men, is that in today's Gospel we have only heard half of the story. It began with the words, "When the angels had left and gone into heaven, and we are left with the shepherds traipsing down the hillside in the dark, after the great angelic sound and light show is already over, after the awe-inspiring epiphany of the heavenly hosts has already finished." Well, perhaps that does provide a fitting gospel reading this year as we celebrate a COVID Christmas. And not only do we only get half of the shepherd's story this morning, but to it has been tacked on what seems to be the beginning of another story. After 8 days had passed, it was time to circumcise the child, and he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. However, this verse 21 of the second chapter of Luke, tells us what the Christian is celebrating at New Year. After 8 days had passed, it was time to circumcise the child. January the 1st is the feast of the circumcision. In other words, it is the day when our Lord, as a week-old baby, first shared a drop of his blood. And he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived. January the 1st is also the feast of the naming of Jesus, the day when this week-old infant was given the name above every name, the name that empowers his disciples. Please remember this when you celebrate New Year. January the 1st is not just a secular feast. It is also the double feast day of our Lord's circumcision and naming. So, what was it that the shepherds saw after they had traipsed down the hillside? Not much. In Luke's account, there is only the bare stable and a newborn babe. What it all means, what it is all about, why, the shepherds already know the answers to that. They have just been witness to the angels and the heavenly hosts. The shepherds have heard the good news of great joy for all the people, and it is they who go out and proclaim it to the world. Indeed, it is the shepherds who tell Mary and everyone else what is so special about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. Mary is just a tired and harassed mother who is far from home. Jesus is just a babe born in the lowliest of circumstances. So, what does it mean for us when we come before this newborn babe this morning? Like the shepherds, perhaps we have to bring the answers with us. What do we know of God's glory in the heavens and of peace on earth? What visions have we had of angels and of the heavenly host? It is our task too to go out and share these stories. We must share them with one another and share them with those who are fearful, depressed or grieving at the end of this bitter year. But before we do, take a moment to lay them at the feet of this young mother and before the newborn babe who will shed his first drop of blood for the world in just a few days' time. Happy Christmas to you all, and have a happy and holy New Year.